Hello, my name is Terry Meer, and I will be your host today. All of us here at Sustainable Kashi are proud to provide these free classes to help us all learn ways of learning and living more connected with each other. Please learn more about our project at sustainablekashi.com. Please type in where you're from in the chat box. We'd love to just know where you're all from. And if you have any questions during this conversation, type them in. We'll make sure we answer them in the end. Today, we're talking about regenerative organizations. Really excited and very proud to have Rick Wright with us today. Rick experience spanning 3 decades has been working across the globe, transforming organizations and people who run them. His clients have included Johnson & Johnson, General Electric, Wells Fargo Bank, DIRECTV, Disney, Sony, Cisco, and of course, Skyy Vodka. So he is dedicated to social change through businesses, sustainability, sufficiency, social equality, and spiritual development. And currently is the CEO of Sacred Kashi here in Sebastian, Florida. We're very excited to have you here, Rick, and thank you for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be with you.
I want to start by asking you to define what is a regenerative organization.
So there's a couple of ways people would talk about regenerative organizations. So one, you could talk about a big piece of it is living systems theory, that everything's alive, it's all on a continuum. And that you really, in regenerating, you're looking beyond the short term. You're really looking at the nuances of really that life cycle. How do things, birth, they may pass away, but rebirth again. And whatever is passing away, can it be utilized like a closed loop system for what's birthing? So that is, I think, the area that I'm the most interested in. But there is another leadership area to it that is quite exciting, which is sometimes when people think of regenerative organizations, they also think of an open leadership system that's actually not centralized, and that different people can make their own decisions within that. And really it's used for innovation or radical ideas. So, and mostly those ideas are usually, the common denominator is they think beyond, they think of the interconnectedness of the organization with the world. So there's a couple ways to look at it right there. I think we'll talk about a lot. Today.
I appreciate that that framing, because a lot of time people get lost into organizations or corporations and just think of that heartless, soulless entity that's put out there. And I really wanted to ask you how do you feel that people, profit, and planet can all find a place in business to help and all live synergistically together?
Yeah, I think if we're just logical, right? Which I'm not saying people in business are, like I think all of us, maybe one of the common denominators I think people have is this journey about being connected and really realizing we're all connected and we're all one. It's kind of every major spiritual path, that's a tenet of all of them. We're all one. And the business is also on that journey, because business is really a bunch of people. So depending, what the culture's like inside of that and what that, the organization's an organism. So that's a lot of people hear me say that, and that comes out of this conversation we're having today is it's alive, right? It's a living system. But its thinking has you act a certain way, just like you would individually, but it's a collective. And if you think that it's all about yourself and you're in scarcity, and it's like, I got to get mine, and I don't think about you getting yours, you end up one way. But if you actually think that actually it's all abundant and all interconnected, and if I tap into that and I look at it from that point of view, and I reach out for that interconnectedness, will my prosperity and in all areas, including money, grow. And so I think in leaders, if you're looking at leadership and studying it, you have to make a choice in that on like, what's your view as a leader? And that's why I think people started calling, regenerative organizations is a view. It's a living systems view. And of course, in this view, we would say all of it is connected. And when there's actually a detriment to the individual business if you don't think of all of it, because you don't tap into all your resources. And there's a fundamental stance of us against them. So there's conflict. And then there's also like, there's not enough for me and you embedded in if you don't take it all in there, and all that manifests inside of the organization. And I've never quite gotten that, because it's really the opposite of how the world really works. And I think the imbalance that people talk about in the world among that is from that worldview. And so, we reap what we sow, I guess is the best way to say it.
That's a beautiful expression of that. And I believe one of my favorite parts of working with you in the time I've worked with you is your understanding of the 8 forms of capital, that you understand that profit is not the end destination, but the experience, the spiritual growth, the community, all of these different forms of capital are very important. Mm-hmm. So how would you weigh the importance of those different forms of capital when working with a new organization?
Well, yeah. So I see profit. So if you're, all business, it is a form of energy, right? Like every organization makes a profit somehow, so it can keep energy or gas in its fuel tank to stay alive. So to say that's not important doesn't make any sense either. So that's kind of the radicalization on the other. It is important. So and I don't believe in nonprofit. I believe that we have for-profit businesses, and then we basically have non-tax businesses, which most people will call nonprofit, but I don't agree with that. All of us make a profit. That's how we're alive. It's just some of us, depending what country you're in, we have a non-tax status, so we don't have to pay taxes on our profit. So that scorecard of money, we'll call it, in business, I see it really as a scorecard. It is not only how healthy you can get fuel, right? Regenerate yourself. That's a fuel, just like the other areas are a fuel. You have to look at that fuel so you can take care of the people, in your business, the operations of your business, and the cause your business is in, like helping others. So I really look at that as, if you do all the rest of the areas that you're referring to diligently and mindfully, this one area that's the scorecard of financial profit takes care of itself, that it's a symptom of everything else. And then what happens is, in my experience, we get, people who run businesses are just people, right? So fear, if you really let fear grab us, we cut the corners because we're afraid we're not going to stay alive, right? We're in survival, and people think of capital, money, as how you're going to stay alive, which is accurate. I can't say, well, you're not accurate. You are accurate. But if that fear that you can't do what you want to do and get the money becomes greater, well, you start cutting all those corners. So you consciously would cut corners to get the profit. Or the other thing we have, just individually and as a collective in an organization, is we just don't know what we don't know. So we just don't know, like we're all learning and growing, and sometimes we don't even know what we're doing, and we see it as we go. So that's why coaching and mentorship and peer groups and all that's so important. Innovation is super important. I think being exposed to people not in the sector you do business, that people who do other types of businesses are really important to be exposed to, because they have ideas that maybe I don't have.
Like that.
How to use all those 8 forms of capital. And everybody leans into one of them a little more than others because they like it or they're good at it. So it's good to be exposed to as many things as possible, or views as possible, because you get to see what you don't see.
Absolutely. And on a business standpoint, I've found that the more you can combine those forms of capital. So if like you're in the business of providing an experience, if you can actually give people the business or the experience as well as a social experience, all these different forms of capital can combine together to create that resiliency. So I really appreciate that model.
It makes you stronger, because your base is wider.
Absolutely.
Even though fear makes you think I got to do this, but you're one pointed, right? Say it's money. You're very wobbly. So the more you flatten that base out and attend to all of it, so it's a strong platform. Again, it seems logical when you hear it. I remember the first time I heard kind of some of these concepts, I was like, well, that makes sense. I didn't know it was kind of that simple, but I think maybe that's the same thing. It's like, it's simple, but not easy. It's not easy. And that's why I think a lot of people, even if they know what to do, they don't do it, because it's extremely hard to do, I think. And I always say, like, leaders who try to run businesses this way, they're way more skillful than leaders who are just looking for a profit, even though at least in the West, people who make a lot of profit get all the advertising. That you hear about the richest people in the world, right? You don't really hear about the most impactful people in the world or the most sustainable.
Sounds like a culture shift that needs to happen. So in permaculture, we have 3 ethics that we love to repeat. We talk about earth care, people care, and the distribution of surplus. So of those 3 ethics, which do you feel is the most important in organizing sustainable businesses?
I don't know if there's one that's more important, because I really bought into this thing that's all important. So I don't know if I really would weigh them that way. I look at them more about the dynamics of them. So I really do believe it's all a living system. So it's all shifts, right? Just like our body today, it's all alive, every cell, everything that makes us up. And it's constantly changing, and there's some homeostasis or balance, right? But it's all not the same. It's always different every moment. And it's really trying to work and tend to that garden, tending to that garden. And, a leader's schedule will look at how they tend to their garden. So in the perfect world without fires, which doesn't exist, you're kind of moving across these areas, and you're trying to tend to all of them and grow them all. And doesn't mean you're personally doing that, but your leaders are doing that, and you're asking and probing how they're doing that. And some things, if you really want it to grow right, you tend that garden more, right? And then other things, maybe your garden catches on fire and you got to put it out, and now you're in a different kind of a crisis that has you regenerate. And then as it burns down, you have a thing. You can look at what's not useful, or you can look at what's useful, right? So, you know, anything that burns down that's a fire, you know, can be great fuel and nutrients for the next thing. So I would say all three of those things are extremely important, but I will say, I'm trying to see how bold I'll be. I will say an organization's made up of people. If there's no people, there's no organization. Even in, you know, I come out of California in the tech world. So someone will say, no, it's all software, except I'm like, well, someone had to build it. And there's a logic inside of it that actually is from the viewpoint of who built it. So even artificial intelligence is not excluded from people. And that's what, you know, right now there's a big thing about AI and the biases in it because mostly white people build it. So it's got the same racism, institutional racism in it as other institutions have. And I agree with that point of view.
I appreciate that concept. And I know that we've been here at Sacred Kashi working on the 3 pillars of environmental justice, social justice, and spiritual awakening. How do you feel social justice playing a role in that tripod, in that trilogy?
Wow. Yeah, I'm pretty big on it. And I don't know, you know, that's a good question. Like, how do you get big on something like that? You know, I'm big on it because I had tragedy in my life that were close, and I saw the injustice, and it at first pissed me off, and I kind of raged against the machine. You know, and which I don't recommend, because then I'm just wielding violence with violence, and now I'm locked into a violent destruction. You know, later on, I learned around justice and things like that, that nonviolence is really the only permanent solution for real change, is nonviolence and love. So the tactic or the tool we use in all this, including social justice, matters. Paul Newman used to say, you know, when he started his food business, it's not how much money you make, it's the quality of your money, the integrity of your money. Same thing in social justice. It's the path matters as much as the end. Now, other people disagree in that.
I love that sentiment. That is really beautiful.
Yeah.
To where the path is the destination. Very
in
nice.
social justice, the path is it, because it models what you want the end state to be, or you're just locked into this war. I won this year, but you win next year, because we are at war. It's like any relationship. And so the ability for everything, just take it back to living systems thinking, the ability for a fair shot for it's not that everything's the same, but everything has the same opportunity to grow and prosper and be in its cycle, right? So if, you know, I don't know all this, that's why I have you, Terry. It's, you know, I know growing an avocado is different than an apple. I don't know why. You do though, right? That's why you grow them and you oversee all that, and I don't, but I'm smart enough to have you. And what you're really interested in is that the earth regenerates and not depletes. And that's environmentalism is social justice. Permaculture is social justice. You can't separate that out from permaculture. That's not possible, because the stance of it is regeneration. The whole point of it is to regenerate. And or you would call it farming or something else, right? You would call it, I don't know what we would call it, but we wouldn't call it what it is. And that's the same thing in societies, and it's the same thing inside of organizations. And but you know, it's not easy. Now,
Yeah,
creating justice is not easy inside of organizations at all, and inside of societies, it's not easy at all.
yeah, so that's one of my favorite things that you do is you create that space and add importance to social justice issues, to issues that maybe other CEOs would not take time to focus on. And I just really want to appreciate that in your style.
Well, thank you. But I'm bought into something, right? And that's kind of what I'm saying to all you. What are you bought into? And then can we align our behavior with that? I'm really bought into living systems theory. I really believe everything's alive. And within that, all this applies. Now, am I still blind to many things? Absolutely. You know, that's why diversity matters, right? And that people might tie that into social justice, but you can't have a bunch of people who think the same around a table. I can sit there alone. You know, you really want different points of view so you can see a holism.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I really appreciate you're talking about human potential. You're talking about bringing out the best in people. So what are some strategies or techniques that you've used to kind of unleash that human potential within an organization?
Well, the first technique I really use is people are more important. And a lot of people don't use that. You know, people think I work for an organization. It's like, yeah, but an organization is made up of something just like cells. And so a big piece of that is people. And so the first thing I do to unleash that is I have to reverse the cultural mindset. You know, that the organization only reflects the consensus of the people, even though organizations are not democratic either. They're hierarchies, right? They're hierarchies. And, and there's a lot of ways to have people have input, but you got to know it is a hierarchy also. And we might get into that, just like there's hierarchies in all organisms too, right? There are these hierarchical constructs, and organizations are the same. So you're really looking like what makes it up, and people really make it up, and that starts unleashing people. Then the other thing I think with people, there's a couple of things that it's hard for me, is hard to apply that unleashes people. The first one is to really be a powerful catalyst. One has to be accountable. You have to be accountable. You have to be the one that says, I'm accountable, or you don't have much impact. You have to have that mindset that I'm accountable for my life. I'm at choice to work here, which a lot of people don't think because of fear. And I have say, and that matters. And they don't have to get that overnight, but because it doesn't happen overnight, but you got it. That's part of the culture shift, is like, you're accountable for what you're doing. It's not being done to you. And you got to look at your, intended and unintended consequences. So it's kind of a point of view of inquiry, spiritual inquiry. It's, even though you wouldn't name it that, right? It's like, hey, we call it in business, you would call it deep insight. Can you see things that other people don't see? And do you know the repercussions of those, so you can have a little more wisdom? And unleashing that in people, and some people would call that empowerment, right? If we said, how do you empower people? It's kind of interesting, but for me, the bottom rung of empowerment's accountability. And then what I'm saying is, I know you're accountable for these things, and I trust you. And that's really where people feel that energy move, like they're getting sourced, right? Or they're regenerating. They felt one way, now they're feeling another. But where it doesn't work is people will have a lot of creativity, we'll say, like ideas, but very little accountability. And again, to me, that's like being all about just making money and you're wobbly and versus being a flat table working everything. That doesn't work. So the mindset that I'm the source of is a very powerful mindset. I source because I'm alive and I'm part of the ecosystem. I source and I am sourced.
That is
yeah.
Absolutely
So
beautiful.
there's a lot of other steps in that, and it doesn't look the same for each individual because they're all unique. And I think that's the beauty of leadership or mentoring people is you might even actually say the opposite to somebody verbally for them to get the same lesson, but they look at everything totally different. So the idea is like, they're not going to hear it this way, but they'll hear it this way. For example, some staff encouragement really works for them. Other staff constraints really work for them. And businesses apply both. Like, we can't do that. We don't have that. Now figure it out. That's a very powerful tool. And I think that's living systems. Like, we don't have that in this earth, in this part of the world. So you adapt. And then in another part, you do. And I even see that, on our 80 acres, there's certain things that work in one spot that don't work in another.
Yeah.
People are the same. If
I hear you correctly, you're really talking about integrity and the ability to empower people to be authentic in their service. And I believe that's a difference, and as to where there is accountability, but there's an accountability to be authentic. And I really appreciate that in your style. So instead of just putting people into a job because you need the job done, you actually look at the integrity of that person and make sure they're in the right job. And I really appreciate that style.
You're welcome. Yeah, that's hard on people because, people who work with me know I'll keep jobs empty, totally empty out of that philosophy, which there's consequences for that. And, every organization's different, but I prefer to do that and have that constraint than to get, people would say a wrong fit or, but think about, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just on the living. I don't really get an avenue to really, a place to talk about living systems theory so much and regeneration because, we kind of look at it different. And it just really, a good plant can't grow in bad soil. So where you put someone, if they can't grow in that, and it's all about me, right? Or the organization, well, they're not going to grow. But why put, to me, it's logical. Well, why do I put them in there to fail? They're not going to get what they want, and the organization's not going to get what they want. Then in the end, I got damage in them, and I got damage in the organization. Now I got twice the work. So if you're just thinking about yourself, it's totally insane to do that, in my opinion. It just, you got to think it all the way through to the end result. It's like, I've never really seen somebody who hates their job do as well as somebody who loves their job. I just have never seen it.
I think you said the right plant in the right place at the right time, basically.
If you can do it, right? If you can do it, and that doesn't mean like that's all kind of, we're in the theory right now. In practice, it's more difficult because I've just recently run into this. You can ask people, hey, are you happy? Do you need anything? They say yes. And then you find out they're miserable, and I'm in that thing, but they didn't tell me. I'm not, you got to tell me. And some people I get, and some people think they can't tell their boss that, right? And then they leave or they totally fall apart. And then you got to say, I don't walk around asking, and I do this a lot, how are you? I don't walk around asking, how are you, to be polite. I'm asking because it matters. It matters to your growth and your soil, and it matters to the organization and my accountability. And and we got to get real too, is like when I'm a CEO of any organization, you know, the board of directors, they want me to take care of the organization, and all this other is what I believe does that. So a lot of people win compared to maybe somebody else who doesn't believe in living systems theory, you know, but my job is the same as their job. And sometimes people want, you know, when you make a call about, let's say, people, you have leeway to help people, right? But in the end, what's best for the organization does trump it sometimes when you really don't have any more room. I think I have a lot of room there, maybe more than other people, because I have a little more experience, so I don't cut bait so quick. But, you know, you got to realize that's a constraint. And I can't say that doesn't exist just because most leaders say it doesn't exist because we want to be liked. We want our people to like us. And in the end, kind of go, well, you're all for me. But in my role, I'm really for the organization. But how I do it makes people know I'm for them also, because, and that's what you're talking about. They're included versus not included. So the culture is different. But I do have constraints, right? We all do.
Yeah.
And what's wrong is to say I don't have them, and then I can't, then I lack wisdom and I make mistakes. So even though my intention might be good, I don't help the person anyway. So that's, these are like, leadership is always in the unknown, right? If people say, oh, I know everything, I'm like, well, then you're not the leader. Because leadership is you work in the unknown.
Exactly.
You're always in the unknown, right? And you never have enough information. And that's your edge, is to be there. And if you're not in there, you know that you're taking a break. But that scares people to tell them that. Like, I think it's okay to say when people, and that happens to me all the time, what should I do? I'm like, I don't have a clue what you should do yet. You know,
you're very fortunate to have the decades of experience of working with all these very successful organizations. And I mean, just the privilege to have, and the success story is just so absolutely wonderful. And I'm really grateful to have that experience to lean on now. So in that frame, what would you say is the hardest part of your job?
personally or as a leader?
I imagine they're the same thing.
Oh, there you go. He's, for me, it's self-care. Because in the top of leadership, the nature of it, mostly the nature of it, in what I do, which is usually reorganizations when things are in crisis, right? So there's a lot going on for it to stay alive or be relevant in the way they want it to be relevant. So I'm a little different than just a CEO, because a CEO usually would get it after I'm done, and those are all worked out. So the pressure, the hardest thing is the pressure, and the accountability is the hardest thing. And can you be sourced in it? And it weighs on me. And I think it weighs on, you know, I've been a trusted advisor for everybody. And what you don't want people to know is how much it weighs on you. It can be really crushing without skill sets to handle it. 24/7, there's usually issues. That's why most leaders don't stay married, or they might be married in name, but they really are married to their organizations, because it requires that amount of time. If you look at large corporations, there is no lifestyle balance in them, right? They basically work all the time. That is their expression, and other things suffer. So it's the balance. If you want those other things, like a lot of people that I know who are successful up there, they don't want the other things. They're like an Olympic athlete. They just want to win the gold. So they're happy with that lifestyle. I'm not one of them, so I'm at a disadvantage. I would like a little more, like to hang out. I want to do that. And so I have to work on self-care and boundaries, and I have to have a stronger tool of surrender and letting go intellectually. Like I must not ponder 24/7, right? Things come at you 24/7, but can you just let them pile up? And that's an integrity and a stamina technique too. And frankly, like in the large corporations you talk about, people that I coach, they already know how to run great businesses because most of the people I coach have been working 20 years and they're going to be the next CEO or run a major part of the world for a company, right? They already do everything right. What their issue is taking care of themselves and having very deep insight. Because when you do global concerns, you never even see your factory or the people who work with you. You never see anything. So you have to make, without enough time and with no actual visual sight, which a lot of leaders lean on, you have to make the right choices at the right time, all the time, to keep your job. So you have to develop very deep insight.
That's perfect. And you bring up the fact of this frame of global leadership, and that's such a large scale for a lot of us to kind of wrap our minds around. But how do you see responsible and ethical businesses really preparing us for this climate crisis that we all face? Do you see it playing an important role?
Yeah, if they become ethical. I mean, we're in a climate crisis because we're not ethical, and or we wouldn't be in it. We think and some of it's view. I mean, it really is shocking, when people wake up, we don't think we're of the earth, right? That we actually came out of the earth. We don't think we're a part of it. We actually act like we're on, the earth happened and then someone beamed us down on it. We walk on it. And we're just so not connected to the earth. We use it we even call it a resource, right? It's a resource. Just like people, I love when people say, I need resources and my consumers. So people aren't people and the earth's not the earth. We're now in this alternate universe, right? And I will say this. Alternate political universes, which America itself is looking at now, is just a mirror of what already exists about alternate business universes. And that's why we're in what we're in, is when people just don't agree on the fundamentals. So if you agree you're living systems and we're all connected, you behave one way with the environment. If you believe that is not a fact, right? Like say that we don't agree on the facts. Well, businesses do not agree on the facts, right? So then you end up here, and it's really, for a lot of people, it's pretty scary, especially if you get your facts wrong, right? So the environmental crisis, I mean, I have a hard time with it. It's like, it's all karma, right? You reap what you sow. You look at it, it's dying. It's dying, like 95% of all the big fish in the seas are dead. We just have this fantasy that we're going to have technology or something. We're going to kind of morph out of it. Maybe we will, but I don't have that. I think we need regeneration.
Yeah, I think you're really talking about that authenticity and accountability on the larger scales of the organization, and I really appreciate hearing that.
And those are political things too. I mean, when you talk, I mean, we're getting a little. I don't know if we're getting heady, but maybe we're getting a different thing. Like you got to really, I've been lucky enough to operate on a global scale. And the pressure on that, even from governments to major conglomerates, because governments have their agenda. So they will force, large corporations to behave a certain way inside of their boundaries. Everybody thinks of China the most, but all do that, including the US, for what they want. And I hate to tell you, most of it is, it's about us, not about you. So we're always in a conflict. But, at that level, you're constantly elegantly and non-elegantly muscled to bend to the country's, what they think is what's best for them.
Yeah, the personal agendas. And I think that we've been on that pattern for a very long time in business, especially traditional business. And I think COVID has kind of allowed us to come out of that frame and into this new mindset, if you will. So how do you see regenerative organizations kind of redefining this business world in this post-COVID existence?
I don't. I think it will. Everybody's eyeballs went up. I think we'll go back to what we went to, and I think it'll be worse than ever. And out of that catastrophe, we may have, but the level of, for people in, see, the gap's too big. People in power are behind that fence and they're not affected yet. It's the poor and the downtrodden that are, but they don't have any power. So this people here, they were okay during COVID. So now they're coming out, and what are they looking for? More power. So behind the doors, the last year, with people I coach, even though, I still do that even as the CEO, I haven't seen anything change about this big, let's take up the mantle in business, and we're all going to change how we're doing our business, and we're going to be living systems theory, and we're going to do that. Okay. If you really look at it, there's only one industry that has from gas to electric, but the problem is, how do you get electric, right? So yeah, it's really kind of a shell game there, because if you really look into that for the earth, the pollution could even be bigger from electric if you go coal fire versus if you go wind, right? So outside of that one, I don't know of any major sector of industry that none of them have actually said anything about what you're talking about. Like, we've learned from COVID and we're going to all be regenerative and save the world. If you really look at it, there's no movement there on a global way.
Yeah, that's not a common conversation in the marketplace now, just the joy of reconnecting.
Yeah, and then people want to reconnect, and people might change their lives, right? That could be good for us in the retreat business. Individuals might want to change, but you're really talking about global power structures, and that's very different than individuals. Right now, right at the moment, there's not a tipping point inside of that. As a matter of fact, if you really kind of look at that, like, we're kind of in another world, but like global scenario planning, which Shell actually is the most prolific at it. All scenario planning really has us going the other way. That's why everybody right now, when people really want to take advantage of crisis, like make money when the market goes up or down, people are investing in water, because water's the new oil. So if you own all the water rights, right, that's, you win, but someone loses. So you see most conglomerates going after, and countries going after water rights. And that's been going on for the last 10 years. And that's increased now because they know there's not going to be any water. But if you own it, then you got yours, and you can then dominate other people and sell it to them.
Yeah, for me, I've seen more ethics enter business in these recent years than I think I've ever seen. And of course, I'm not too deep into the business world. But you, as a consultant and as a person who is in this field, what is some advice that you would give to someone just this new business starting out, really excited to really enter a world of living and regenerative organizational structure?
Yeah, well, I would tell them, it's the best structure out there. That's why I do it. Like, I'm a consultant with a lot of conglomerates, and they have the choice of hiring anybody. It's not really about me, but it's about what I believe in more than me. They can hire anybody in the world to help them, but they hire me because I got a certain theory that affects them. And they might not know it's living systems theory when they start, but it is. So I think, my stance with them is it's proven. So if someone starts, I would say you start with living systems theory because it's actually reflective of reality. Reality, I believe, is we're all interconnected. If you want to think it or not, we are. And if living systems theory allows you to have that, and regenerative organization theory is based on living systems theory. So just so everybody knows, like, why does he keep talking about that? All regeneration is that loop. It can be closed in loops, but it's a loop, just like the seasons, and that's off of living systems theory. That's where it came from. So, I just think, hey, since that's really probably how everything really is, it might be good to replicate your business because it's a microcosm of the whole exactly off that theory. And you will see you could be a juggernaut in that to a certain point.
Yeah, I love seeing when natural systems imitate the systems within business. So if we're looking at a food forest, there's all these layers within the food forest, and like the apex species tree creates the environment for all these under species to grow. And if we just put that tree off by itself into a little field, it would not grow nearly as well. And it would be limited. So we kind of create these syntropic environments, which they build on each other and create more than isolation. And it seems like business worlds like to isolate things to kind of, you're in that department, and never should those departments meet.
Right.
So I really appreciate that model.
Yeah. So it's like, breaking down silos is that, like in, Sacred Kashi's getting like, really trying to break those things down is just, trying to have the organization reflect what it already really is. And the reason it's not firing on all cylinders is it's not acting congruently with what it is. Now, just because I say what I say, like, people might go, God, I thought we were really getting somewhere. And this guy says we're not, well, that doesn't mean I don't keep doing what I'm doing to change it. You got to pick your life, right? You got to pick it. That's accountability, right? So a great cause is one you might not get done in your lifetime. But in the end, we all have to look, and there's hard decisions in that. And that's the same in business. When businesses has cycles and businesses die and parts of them die. You can't just say they don't, they do. And you have to trim them out. Right? Just like your garden, you don't ever not trim. Things don't ever live forever. That's Pollyanna. It's not accurate, but people will argue for that all the time and change. I hear it all the time. Rick, or where I'm at, Rude Gary, why are you always changing it? And they always give you the same thing. Oh, you're like the corporate guy. You're they always throw that in, like they really say, oh, you're heartless. And I think like, no, I'm a realist. And you don't really want to accept where we're at. And where we're at is part of it's dying. So you shepherd that to a good death. We're all going to die. What we have control over is, are we going to have a good death? And is it for something? We're all going to die. And organizations reflect living systems, departments, programs, even whole organizations do die. And sometimes when you look at that and you feel into her, so I think they're really alive. I think they're female, but they might be male, but they birth, so they're feminine. So I always call them her, because that's how, to me, they're her, they're Gaia. And you got to listen to her. You have to listen to her, and she'll whisper to you and say what she needs. Sometimes, just like an elderly parent will finally say when they're old, like, I'm ready to go. And will I help that shepherd in? And I've been in that position, and it affects a lot of people, but I think people, I don't know about you, I'll say this. I always suffer when I argue with reality.
it's a hard argument to make.
It's a hard, yeah.
I really,
and I do, I mean, I'm human too. Like, I get handed things I wish weren't that way. But that just because I wish they weren't that way doesn't mean they aren't that way.
yeah. And I appreciate your way of being able to focus on maybe the less comfortable subjects and address them in accountable and responsible ways.
Yeah. And that's part of empowering people. Like, you can do that too. But like, it's hard to make something work when you don't agree on the facts, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you're in the red and not in the black financially, and kind of say, I want to keep doing what I'm doing, I'm like, great, you're dead.
Yeah,
because eventually you're not going to have enough fuel
mm-hmm.
to live, right? Because you've got to pay your bills and all that, and that's the exchange. So I'll get that a lot, like, we want to keep it all the way and have a different result. It's like, the only way to get a different result is different action.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, you're having a hard time with that. And then what you want to do is not be accountable that you're having a hard time with that. And you want to argue with someone who doesn't have a hard time with that. And that's change, right?
Yeah, those are the hard decisions that have to be made. And it's nice to have someone in a position that's grounded and able to really see the big picture.
Yeah, let's take it into this and really drive it home. So Susei's here too, who did Sustainable Kashi and founded it before you. I have never seen, since I've met you or Susei, neither one of you run out under a tree when a dead leaf falls, screaming, trying to tape it back onto a tree. I've never seen it. You guys like, well, it's supposed to fall off. It has a cycle, right? Well, in my world, everybody's grabbing the leaves, trying to put them back on the tree. And then they're yelling at me going, hey, it's dead. And that because it's hard, death scares people, right? Scares people.
That's a good analogy.
And then I'll say this in here is like in, capitalism, you're only, what grows is democratically people decide what's useful. So the paperclip's pretty useful. Maybe down the road when we stop killing trees, the paperclip will be obsolete, right? But that it's useful, so people use it. So people vote if you're useful or not. So a lot of people kind of say like, I got this great idea and this is it, but it doesn't work. And I'm like, and this is the benchmark is when society says what you have is valuable, it will buy it. And if they don't think it's valuable, it won't. And that's on their view. So when people argue about reality, what they're saying is, I want to stay in power. So what's valuable right now is I'll disregard the facts so I can stay in power. And governments do that, or large organizations and small, and individuals do that. You don't treat me well in my marriage. I want to stay in power and not look at that. So I'll say, no, you're wrong. But the truth really is deep down, I know I don't treat you well. If you don't rotate where you plant, right? And what you plant, you're going to deplete the earth. But all I know is you do that. And Susei did it on the land I'm on now before you. And I go to the grocery store, I get a papaya this big, right? Well, I don't know about where all you guys live, but I live on Sacred Kashi. And when the papayas come to mine, they're that big. I mean, I take pictures of them because they're bigger than the coffee pot. And then you open them up, juice falls everywhere. And you got all these quality problems. And why did that happen? Because you guys believe in living systems theory. So that sucker is huge. And then I eat it and I get nourished and then I do that, right?
Yeah, I definitely believe that once we plug into the ecosystems and have those regenerative systems in place, what we create is far more satisfying, more nutritious, and more internally rewarding. So it's nice to see that same theory move into the organizational and business world. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us your knowledge. And how can we get in touch with you in case we have any consulting?
Rick at Wright Consultancy. Rick at Wright, WRIGAC Consultancy.com.
It's super exciting to be talking about integrating these business and living worlds. And I believe we're talking the same language, just in different arenas. So if you have a takeaway from this week's class, if you have a question that we didn't get to, please join us in our Facebook group, in our community. We'll be talking about this subject and we'll be able to really address you personally. There's a post there now, and please feel free to add to the conversation. Thank you, Rick Wright, for joining us. Thank you, Amy Zelt, for doing all the magic of keeping these calls happening. And we couldn't have done them without you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on us 50 free permaculture classes. This is a celebration. This is a compliment, and this is our gift to you. We hope you've gotten lots of great things from them. I think really what we're talking about in this idea of living organizations is passion. It's putting our love into action. And this is the same, whether we're planting fruit trees or whether we're cleaning the oceans or whether we're creating a product that you truly believe in. We are putting our love into action. So thank you for helping us put our love into action. And we look forward to seeing you in our next project. And please keep in touch at sustainablekashi.com. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon.